It's over 9,000!
Welcome, Super Elite Warriors, to Final Forum, a podcast for the discussion of all things Dragon Ball. I am your host, Jelli, an elite recruiting member of the Frieza Force on a mission to find the best warriors from across the galaxy to join the greatest army of all time, and I am joined, as always, by my new recruit co-host.
This is the Bekinney, and join us as we uncover the cultural inspirations and hidden history behind Akira Toriyama's seminal franchise. I guess.
You guess?
Well, we're in a nondescript dimensional void inside the belly, digestive system, anus of a giant space whale? It's difficult for me to pretend like people are listening to me right now.
It helps me keep my head.
Well, I didn't say it was pointless, just that it's difficult for me.
Fair enough. This is uncharted territory for both of us.
So with all this keeping of your head that you're doing, are you thinking of a way out of this situation that we find ourselves in?
Actually, I think so. Have you ever seen Dragon Ball Z?
Seriously?
Okay, I meant all the way to the end.
Well, it depends.
On what?
On whether you want me to break shtick or not.
Just because we're in a dimensional vortex doesn't mean you're allowed to break the fourth wall. That's my thing.
I really hope time isn't suspended in here, because if I have to deal with this for eternity, I'm going to be more upset than I already am.
So anyway, as I was saying, there's a part in Dragon Ball Z where the characters find themselves trapped in a dimensional nether space.
And
I think I can use the strategy from that to tear a hole in the fabric of this place and get us out of here. If only I could remember how that went.
we're not going to be stuck in here until we reach that episode on our show, are we? Because that's like years from where we are currently.
No, I think I remember the basics, but it's going to take some time to channel ki and gain as much strength as possible. And while we're taking some time, let's get into this week's topic. And before we do that, we'll do our CTAs here and say, remember to rate and review this show, comment on, and share the links. That is what helps us grow.
Yeah.
The best thing you could do is, if you're listening to us, whatever podcast catcher you're listening to us on, throw us a like or a star rating. That's the best thing you can do. It takes 5 seconds, and it really helps small little shows like ours. And if you want to go above and beyond and give us a review and actually write something, also excellent. And if you want to follow us over on Blue Sky, also excellent. We're on all the other socials also. We just aren't as active on there. But this week, we are going through episodes 86 through 90 of Dragon Ball Z. And we are going to talk eventually, after we do our episode recaps, about the man himself, about Frieza.
Our favorite topic.
Yes.
All right. So I guess I'll kick us off.
Yes.
As previously stated, we're starting this week with episode 86. We're going to 90. So, starting with episode 86, titled The End of Vegeta. Don't ignore the title this time. So, Vegeta's getting worked over harder than a heavy bag at Customato's gym. What's worse is that nobody seems to want to help him. Shocker. Goku hones in on their location and heads out. Meanwhile, we just get a nice brutal beating of Vegeta for our eye holes. But right before Frieza delivers the killing blow, Goku arrives to save the day. He tells everyone, except Vegeta, that they've done a good job and it's all in his hands now. His appearance, while sudden, doesn't seem to bother Frieza until he gets a good look at him. We are then given a quick flashback about Bardock. Yes, our first glimpse of Goku's father. He stood against Frieza prior to the destruction of Planet Vegeta. And if his appearance wasn't unnerving enough, Frieza tries to attack Goku, only to get kicked in the face. It's followed up by a Frieza energy barrage that Goku handles easily with one hand. Vegeta starts gloating, claiming Goku is a Super Saiyan and he will be Frieza's downfall. This turns out to be the ravings of a dying man, however, as Frieza perforates his chest. We get a glimpse into Vegeta's past of conquest and bloodshed, and then Frieza's sudden but inevitable betrayal. He pleads with Goku to seek vengeance for his people. It's kind of weird to see him put aside his personal ego for the bigger dream of avenging their heritage, essentially. The Saiyan Prince breathes his last. He's a pretty great character. I'm sure he'll be remembered fondly.
I'm sure that's the last we see of him, too.
Is it? Oh, that's...
Yeah. It's sad, right?
Yeah, it's pretty sad, but it's a good character arc.
He was great while he was around, but...
So yeah, Goku buries him in a shallow makeshift grave, mumbles about how he hated him, but said that he did have his pride, I guess. Goku decides, however, to go ahead and pick up the Mantle of Saiyan and formally drops the gauntlet at Frieza's feet. This brings us to episode 87, titled The Ultimate Battle. So we start off with some quick flashbacks. Kaio-sama waxes poetic about the Prince of Saiyans. Piccolo seems excited by the idea of challenging this new, stronger Goku, but quickly surmises that he and the others need to vacate the premises. We also get a fun little animation error where Krillin is standing on the ground in Frieza armor, but then when he flies away and then turns around to yell at Gohan, he's wearing his typical orange gi. Other than that, the art is fantastic in this episode. The fight starts fast and frenetic, the choreo is great, and the energy light show is spectacular. In the dust kicked up by the explosions, Goku learns something interesting. Frieza can't sense energy. Now, we knew this because, scouters, but it's new information for Goku. And he tries to use it to his advantage, and it helps him avoid a lot of trouble. Kaio-sama comments on how Goku is a completely different person since his time training on Kai's planet. Meanwhile, however, Bulma laments her luck, sure that she will die alone on an alien planet. Well, she's only half right, as her presence attracts a huge group of frogs. The fight continues to intensify, but it's almost like Goku's kind of playing around a little bit. This bothers Frieza, who decides to turn the battlefield into a volcano. Distraction serves as an opening for Frieza's continued assault, but it's more flash than substance. Frieza lands a solid hit, and Goku's assumed to be a volcano barbecue. Frieza's ready to move on to Piccolo, but it turns out Goku is hanging on by his fingertips, because, I guess he forgot how to fly. I don't know how to explain that. But anyways, it's supposed to be the ultimate battle, but it's still feeling a little bit silly. I don't think these guys are being serious yet. And that brings us to episode 88, titled Clash of the Superpowers. But we just watched the ultimate battle. How could this possibly get better? What's that? Chi-Chi's planning to commandeer a Capsule Corp spaceship? Oh, now this I gotta see. The rest of the Kame crew decide to go with her to Namek, but given that it takes quite some time to get there, I don't think they're gonna be much help. On Namek, Goku finds himself in deep trouble, but he's got a plan. Since Frieza can't sense energy, it's time for some trickery. He's been, knocked into the water, and he's under the surface, and he decides to, leave a couple of, energy, I don't know what you would call them, torpedoes or something? Yeah. And they just sort of, sit there in the water as he swims away. He gets a good distance away, and then he sends them up out of the water after Frieza to, force him to move to a specific spot so that Goku can ambush him. The shots miss. They're basically acting as a distraction. Goku turns Frieza's face into a doormat. Sadly, this doesn't do much other than pique Frieza's interest. He offers to kick it up a notch and uses telepathy to throw a bunch of rocks after Goku, turning the sky into an obstacle course. Goku humors him for a bit, then shotgun blasts all the rocks to dust, which is pretty nice. Frieza decides to throw a much bigger rock, and Goku catches it. Sort of. He gets some help from a nearby cliff. He busts out of the rubble, but it seems that he's the one now who's fallen for a distraction, as Frieza's now captured him in some sort of weird energy ball that he can't get out of. Frieza goes FIFA on his ass and then spikes him into the dirt, and as Goku smashes into the surface, his prison essentially becomes a nuke. The explosion's devastating, it's huge, but Goku, however, it turns out he's just fine. Piccolo confirms that both of them, meaning Frieza and Goku, still are not going all out, despite this being the clash of superpowers. Our combatants square off yet again, with both of them agreeing to start actually fighting now, which is a big, what? They weren't trying up till now? That's pretty intense. That brings us to episode 89, Frieza's Boast. So the heat's going up a notch in this episode. Both fighters have now declared they are done messing around. Frieza starts setting terms, letting Goku pick the battleground, giving him sort of a home field advantage, so to speak. He goes a step further, telling Goku he won't use his hands either. This clearly piques Goku's interest, and they begin in earnest. While we check on Earth. Chi-Chi and the others are prepping for liftoff, but things aren't progressing quickly enough for her liking. She passes her time by breaking Master Roshi's nose, don't worry, it's well deserved, and pestering Dr. Briefs. Oh, right, there's a fight going on. Let's get back to that. Goku's having some trouble landing a blow, but Frieza is staying true to his words. No hands. Goku just becomes more determined. Frieza continues to stay one step ahead of him until Goku gets a firmer grip on the situation. Frieza's tail, specifically. With the fight becoming a literal tug-of-war, but more importantly, what's going on with Bulma? It seems she's stumbled upon a genius frog. He sure does seem familiar. Don't know where we could have possibly seen him before. You know what could be fun? Let's put a translation collar on him so we can communicate with him. What's that? He's now soul-swapped with Bulma. Oh no, it was Captain Ginyu all along. He destroys the collar as well. What's a frog girl to do? But forget about that. Let's get back to the fight. Goku keeps amping up the pressure, but Frieza puts his head in a tail vice. Goku gets out with the patented chomp attack. The shock throws Frieza off guard, which gives Goku the only opening he needs. He pours on the pain until Frieza eventually lays into him with a right hook. Looks like the first one to take a significant blow is Frieza's pride. And that'll bring us to our last episode for this week, which is episode 90, titled Bold and Fearless. Frieza recognizes that this is a very unique situation. It would seem Goku has been sandbagging as well. Before the fight can get started again, however, let's check in on Captain Bulma. It would seem Bulma has managed to stay on the good captain's tail and gets him to crash land right into Piccolo, Gohan, and Krillin. One ridiculously awesome intro later, and it's pretty clear to the boys that Bulma's not really being herself. But they don't really suspect anything nefarious. They chalk it up to stress, I guess. Captain Bulma fangirls over Frieza while Gohan fails Frog 101 spectacularly. Goku takes a knee to the face. Frieza is once again toying with Goku, lording his supremacy over him. A supremacy that Bulma seems really into, by the way. That's a bit weird. Frieza reminds Goku he's only running at about half strength right now, and he's totally outclassing Goku. Back on Earth, the Kami crew is finally ready for departure, but it looks as though departure will now be delayed as Dr. Briefs made a mistake, and the ship isn't actually ready to launch. Back on Namek, the thrashing continues, but now Frieza's saying he's not even using a third of his full power. But Goku has the Kaioken technique. What's that, Kaiosama? He's already running it at times 10? And he's not even a third of Frieza's power? Insane! What can be done? It's starting to look like Ginyu might be making a move on Piccolo as well. Uh-oh. And that's where we end this week.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some really good action in these episodes. There's some really good art. And just the ridiculousness of the constant one-upping between these two is a lot of fun to watch.
Yes, there's like you mentioned, there's a lot of really good art. There's a lot of really good action. There's a lot of really good going on. There is then also a fair amount of frustrating
filler, yeah,
cutaways, and they are like I said, like we said this at one point during this arc, when they cut away before a fight starts or as like tension is mounting, it doesn't feel as frustrating.
Yeah.
Because it just feels like we're building that tension more. When we're in the middle of watching that steam release and that tension be boiled off, and they cut to especially when they cut to Earth, because at least the Bulma stuff, something is kind of happening. But when they cut like back to Earth, you're like, oh my God, please get back. And it's
very jarring,
I'm not
too.
like the. Yeah, I'm not like the, oh, where's all the fighting guy? Because, like, no, I'd be totally fine watching entire episodes of people just hanging out in the Dragon Ball world, but not while there's, like, something actually interesting going on.
Some of the best episodes in Dragon Ball are them just hanging out and doing normal stuff.
Exactly. We've talked about, like, during our Daima discussions, we talked about how, like, I would legitimately love to just watch a show that was, like, Vegeta coming home from training and being like, Kakarot one-upped me again, and like Bulma being like, it's okay, honey, and then Hybis just like doing something super awkward.
Yes, exactly.
And it just being like a sitcom with that. Like, I would love that, but that's under the pretext that there's nothing interesting happening in the dragon world at this time.
Yeah.
If there's a big fight going on, I don't care about what's going on with like Roshi and Chi-Chi at Bulma's dad's house, frankly.
Yeah.
But when the action is happening, it is gorgeously animated, and I do love the constant like one-upsmanship, and I love the strategic fighter Goku. Like,
yeah, where he's more thinking like, where can I get an advantage?
Yeah. And because he's doing it throughout this whole fight, right? He's like, let's start on the ground because I think you'll have the advantage in the air, and you know, like a whole bunch of things. And then I even like I like that he bites him.
Yeah, it's a nice. I'm pretty sure he's not even the first bad guy he's bitten, right? Wasn't there a guy in or no? I might be thinking of something else.
I know later on he bites Boo.
I know. I'll be sitting here and then it'll pop into my head and then I'll mention something probably like later on in the episode.
And I know much later on he bites Whis, and it's like one of the only blows anyone ever lands on Whis, and Whis is like, he's like, don't you have any manners? Like, what is wrong with you? But yes, overall a pretty good batch of episodes, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I am finding them overall slightly less frustrating being able to watch them in like chunks rather than like having one and having to wait for the next one. So
it does help a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so not having the one a week release format, or even like I watched a lot of Dragon Ball, even just like one episode per day. They did that on like Toonami a lot. Even having that would be like, because you'd be like, oh, just one episode? Like nothing happened in this one. But usually if you get a group of like 4 or 5 episodes like this, you feel like things have happened.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Frieza, because Frieza really is the star of these episodes, and ultimately he is one of the most influential and important characters in this franchise. Briefly before we talk about Frieza, actually, let's just mention that Toriyama kind of intended for Vegeta to die at this point. He kept him alive at the end of the Saiyan arc, and he had never even really intended to keep him alive past that, but it's just kind of, and this is the thing I understand as someone who enjoys writing. I won't call myself a writer, but as someone who enjoys writing, that sometimes as you're writing something, the story doesn't lend itself to what you kind of intended at the beginning. And so Vegeta survives, but then Toriyama completely intended for him to die on Namek and that be it. And then he said it wound up being that he got wished back, and then he kept bringing Vegeta back to be around because he was convenient to have around. Meaning, whenever you needed narratively somebody to screw the pooch with their pride, it was nice to have a person like that hanging around where you didn't have to find a way for it to be Goku or Gohan or like somebody who shouldn't be acting arrogantly.
Yeah.
But so yes, that's a like fun fact there. So Yes, despite not appearing until the second half of the Dragon Ball manga, because remember, Dragon Ball is just called Dragon Ball all the way through to the end of Buu in the manga. Frieza is considered one of the most popular villains, and since he destroyed planet Vegeta, is the catalyst behind basically the entire story, especially the Z portion of this entire story. Because of this and his absolutely unrepentant nature, he is thought of as Goku's arch enemy, much to the chagrin of Vegeta, whose issue with Frieza are a little more personal than Goku's. Toriyama had said that he did not like to draw anyone, even bad guys, so unscrupulous that it affects the readers psychologically. We've talked about this sort of mentality a lot. He didn't like to have a villain appear to be so villainous that everyone would know they were the villain just from a glance. But Toriyama said in the 30th anniversary Dragon Ball Super history book that Frieza came close. This is why Frieza's speech is so proper and polite. Toriyama wanted to play with with his juxtapositions and his opposites and his subversions, so he gave the worst villain the franchise had ever seen the most eloquent speech possible. Something that's undermined very much by the original Funimation dub, and then even the Funimation redubs that have come out in later years. They maintain Linda Young as the voice of Frieza through this portion of it, and whether you like her or don't like her, it doesn't, she does not come off at all the same as that, haughty, polite, kind of almost like a wasp, very, very polite, but there's this, just evil undercurrent to it. She's just out and out like an evil alien type. I personally vastly prefer the Chris Ayers interpretation later on. That's the more haughty, eloquent Frieza. The character's name is, of course, a pun on Freezer, and as Toriyama did with the Saiyans and Piccolo, once he thought of the leader's name, pun, and theme, he based all their minions along that theme, hence why all of Frieza's henchmen are named after things that would commonly be found in a refrigerator.
Makes sense.
Frieza is partially modeled after Toriyama's second editor, Yu Kondo, and we'll definitely have to do a Kondo episode at some point, but since there's a lot less known about him and Toriyama's third editor, Fuyuto Takeda, than Kazuhiko Torishima, we'll kick the Yu Kondo can down the road a ways and maybe do a Kondo Takeda episode kind of together, probably. Still, there's more to talk about with Frieza, his personality, and especially his design.
Yeah. And while we've already seen Oni pop up in Dragon Ball, namely in and around the afterlife, and we've commented that Toriyama's explicitly using Oni as the servants of the afterlife, the inclusion of horns on Frieza winds up driving us to think of Oni at least a little bit, and we didn't really talk about what Oni are or their historical significance previously, so let's do that now. In simplest terms, Oni are evil demons in Japanese lore. They are depicted as monstrous entities with horns and are hulking muscular creatures who are harbingers of evil. They are most often depicted as having red or blue skin, and for sure the beings who work for King Yama and are seen in Hiffle on Dragon Ball are your typical Oni, and Toriyama is playing with his subversions by having them look a lot like traditional Oni, but being much more like salarymen in their personality and actions to undercut what Japanese readers would expect to see from an Oni. However, with Frieza, he's playing more into the standard. Oni are known for incomparable strength, possession of many powers, a propensity for murder, and even the ability to transform. They are said to have 3 digits on their hands and claw-like fingers, which Toriyama obviously changes to being Frieza's feet. And if you'd like to hear a potential theory as to why, check out our Demon King Piccolo episode where we talked about what having fewer than 5 fingers might have meant to potential censors in Japan and the history of the Barakumin. The idea of Oni comes from Chinese influence on Japanese culture. Dating back over 2,000 years, it was believed in China that people became Gui or spirits upon death. The character used for Gui is the same one later used by the Japanese for Oni, but the Chinese viewed Gui as being possibly good or evil. But because the Japanese would more frequently use the word Oni to talk about Mononoke, or spirits of unknown people, it would end up taking on a negative connotation, and the word Oni became associated with outsiders. Being an isolationist country, the Japanese are always wary at best and outright antagonistic at worst towards outside influences, people, cultures, and as far back as 544, the word Oni was used for an invading force from outside Japan who abducted villagers and brought terror to towns. Texts from the 700s to 900s report about how Oni were controlled by wrathful sorcerers and would eat women, and in the Heian period, Oni became tied to an astrological cosmology known as Onmyodo that was said to predict nights during which Oni would attack. Now, Oni were perceived as landing from elsewhere and being other, and encounters with them needed to be sufficiently terrible, and in official histories, footprints of Oni being found appearing like hooves with 2 or 3 claw print toes were documented. In 1172, an aristocrat named Fujiwara no Kanezane wrote in his diary that creatures looking like Oni with horns arrived by boat and fought with his townspeople, leaving many of them injured or dead before being repelled. These Oni were said to have 2 horns on their head, possibly adornments to the helmets, and had long, straggling hair. Is it possible these were warriors wearing horned helmets from the Near East? Quick side note, these horned helmets we see on Vikings stereotypically were not actually worn by Vikings and are more Mediterranean, so it actually seems more possible that a troop from the Mediterranean might possibly make their way to Japan somehow, but still these stories are clearly embellished and 1,000 years old, so who could say for sure? But in any event, these things all swirl together to make the Oni image that we know today.
Yeah, and the important thing here is that Oni culturally trace back to not merely being powerful demons, but foreigners, or to use a synonym for that word, aliens.
Oh.
Hence, Frieza. There's also some possibility here that Frieza is taking inspirational cues from Christian religion and depictions of Satan as well. We could probably break those things down, but we're kind of assuming our listeners out there at least have a surface level understanding of the devil to get the obvious comparison points. And we'd rather more talk about Frieza's personality and behaviors, as they're more steeped in somewhat lesser known, at least in America, Japanese history. Frieza and the Saiyans are planet merchants. They find a planet worthy of being inhabited, clear it of pesky native populations, and sell it to the highest bidder. As the kingpin of this enterprise, Frieza is the one determining which planets to attack and what their values are. He is based, per Toriyama's own admission in the Daizenshu book series, and I think it was in Daizenshu 2, on real estate speculators of Japan's bubble economy, whom Toriyama called, quote, the worst kind of person, unquote. So, what was the Japanese bubble economy? Let's go back a bit to post-World War II. And by the way, if you want a very thorough breakdown of the bubble economy, check out the History of Japan podcast, episode 20, where the host Isaac spends about half an hour talking about it, as opposed to, I think we'll probably spend maybe 15 minutes. In the wake of World War II, most people thought Japan's economy would eventually recover, but ultimately settle around being a mid-sized power a la Switzerland. This didn't happen. Due to a combination of factors, chiefly not having to spend much money on a defense budget because they were no longer allowed to have a full-scale army, and a massive influx of American money due to the post-war occupation and then the wars in Korea and later Vietnam, Japan's economy quickly recovered from the war, and by the 70s was one of the strongest economies in the entire world. In order to keep fueling this growth from overseas dollars throughout the 70s, Japan kept the value of the yen artificially deflated and artificially weak. It might seem like bad economic strategy to have your money be worth comparatively little, but to illustrate how it makes sense, I'll take a quick example. Let's say it costs 100,000 yen to produce an item and get it to American store shelves. Say like a computer or a television or a video game system, since Japan throughout the 70s and 80s and even to today becomes largely known for its exportation of electronics. If $1 is 100 yen, that item needs to sell for more than $1,000 to make any profit. But if $1 is 300 yen, then that thing only needs to sell for $333, more than $333. So by keeping the yen artificially deflated against foreign money, throughout the 70s, Japan was able to encourage tons of American money to flow into the country. At the height of its economic power, the yen was sitting at an exchange rate of about 360 to 1. These days, it's somewhere around 150. So what happened? As Japan became essentially the world economic superpower, it was in danger of overtaking the US and the USSR. Other countries became frustrated, and ultimately, Nixon and a few other countries like China and the USSR took a bunch of measures, and together they forced the yen to adjust itself and come to a more realistic level in order to level the playing field in terms of competition for the pricing of goods. In response, Japan needed a way to keep its economy flush with cash, and since less would now come from overseas, more had to come from within. Thus began real estate speculation. To keep the cash flow rolling, loans were given out at near 0% interest rates, and businesses bought land on speculative pricing, knowing that land was in limited supply in Japan, and thus its value should only increase. Some of this will probably seem familiar to those of us who lived during the dot-com bubble of the early 2000s, or the housing bubble of the mid-2000s, or the oil bubble of the 2010s, or the recessive forces of COVID, or, well, hoping this podcast lives on through the decades, you can insert your own bubble economy horror story. I'm pretty much betting that there will be cryptocurrency bubble explodings before too long. So if you're listening to this in 2035 and you're like, oh, I remember I remember the Bitcoin bubble. But from 1986 to 1991, Japan's economy saw real estate and stock market prices explode based on speculation, uncontrolled credit supply, and marketability of assets. How rapidly did this bubble inflate? The Japanese stock market index, the Nikkei 225, the equivalent of the Dow Jones, sat around 10,000 in 1985. By 1990, it peaked at nearly 39,000, a record that held for 34 years. Returns in those 5 years averaged 28%, followed by a 40% crash in 1990, and a period of economic stagnation so intense began in 1991 that land prices in Japan did not see year-over-year growth for the first time until 2008. The stock market didn't truly find its bottom until 2008, and Japan's GDP grew on average by only 1% until 2024. The bursting of this bubble caused many to call the 90s the lost decade, but the lingering effects that pulled well through the 2000s and into the 2010s and TBD on the 2020s has caused historians to call this whole 30-year stretch the lost decades, and it remains to be seen if the 2020s will finally prove an end to Japan's economic stagnation.
Yikes. So
yeah.
Much of the blame for this bubble's expansion and subsequent bursting has been laid at the feet of the Bank of Japan for not acting to stem this speculative behavior that saw Japan's land value being estimated at 4 times that of the United States, a country 25 times its size, and for issuing loans at ridiculously low interest rates such that when they finally corrected and imposed interest on those loans, nobody could possibly pay things back. However, as much of the inflation of the bubble was related to land, real estate developers took a large brunt of the flack from satire-minded entertainers. Corruption was a major piece of this and was identified relatively early during this period as the recruit scandal of 1988 exposed that the entire cabinet of Japan's government was being given shares in a human resources firm in exchange for favors. Japan even wound up with their own Bernie Madoff in the form of Nui Onoe? Nui Onoe? Onoe? Is that the right way to say it? Okay.
I think.
A restaurateur who became notorious for her ability to predict the stock market, and as such, she was granted astronomical sums of investment capital by banks across Japan totaling almost 3 trillion yen from 1988 until her arrest in 1991. As the reality of the bubble became apparent and Onoe's investments and returns were in reality worsening, she would have high-level friends at various banks issue her false deposit slips, which she would then use as proof to other banks that her investments were paying off. which would grant her the credit to take out large capital loans with those banks, which she was using to replenish her losses. Think of like a gambler getting into bad debt and needing just one more big score to cover their losses. At the time of her arrest, her debt was estimated to be about 450 billion yen, and as a direct result of her scam, the Industrial Bank of Japan and Toyoshinyo Kinko Bank no longer existed. She took down 2 banks, guys. The bursting of the bubble hit Japan hard and everywhere. Historically, Japan operated very often on Shushin Koyo, or employment for life. From their first global economic successes in the 1920s, on through the economic recovery in the immediate years following World War II, and up through much of the bubble economy years, lifetime employment instilled Japanese workers with an important feeling of job security and encouraged them to enter the management structure and elicited a high degree of company loyalty. Lifetime employment scams became exposed as part of the collapse of the bubble economy, and corporate restructuring by companies that were using asset speculation to balance their books caused many new college graduates in Japan to take on jobs that were less stable and poor paying, or leave the country altogether.
Though the banks historically bear the blame, for good reason, the people at the time took aim at real estate developers, and it wasn't only Toriyama that did this. The director of the 1990s Gamera trilogy, Shusuke Kaneko, has said that his film Linking Love reflects the bubble economy. That movie's awesome, by the way. It's like a very funny movie about this girl who was played by like a popular idol from, I think, AKB48 at the time. And she gets sent back in time and has to figure out how to make sure her parents like fall in love with each other. It's like a very cute, very fun movie. Her dad is obsessed with, I think, like anime girls, and she has to get him to become obsessed with like idol girls so that he's at least obsessed with real girls. And then she simultaneously like convinces her mom to start an idol band, and they and try to force her parents to fall in love with each other.
Adorable.
I got to see it actually in a theater with Shizuke Kaneko at G-Fest in 2019, and the subtitles on it, I have a version of it on my computer now. The subtitles on it are not as good. They're like a fan sub. The subtitles on the version I got to see in theaters were so good. This is where we talk about like subtitling as an art.
Yeah.
There's at various points in the movie characters rap, and the subtitles in like the good version I saw rhymed.
Oh, nice.
So like, and they rhymed like along with the rhymes of the Japanese, so that like you felt like you were like legit like watching this rap. Like it was like perfect.
Right
it was
on.
Awesome. And also, though, of course, I got to bring in my Godzilla reference. The Godzilla franchise took its shot at the bubble economy as well. In the 1991 film, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, which does actually have a lot less portentous sort of the bubble is bursting to it, and more speculation that the bubble will never burst and that Japan's economy will only grow. That's actually sort of the plot of the movie, is that the plot of the movie is like that by 2050, Japan becomes the world economic power and becomes so powerful that they buy entire continents, and Japan owns Africa, and Japan owns South America, and all the other nations of the world are mad at this like superpower that now owns the entire world. So they go back in time to create a monster, King Ghidorah, to destroy Japan so that it economically hurts them bad enough that they
can
have to spend their money rebuilding constantly instead of becoming wealthy enough to like buy the world.
Yeah, that sounds like certain countries' foreign policy.
But the climax of the movie takes place amid Tokyo's financial center, with director Kazuki Omori stating in interviews that it was no accident that his film featured Godzilla stomping through these buildings. These buildings were seen as an eyesore by most of the Japanese at the time, and they were seen as like the embodiment of the the lavishness and the excess of the bubble economy. And so to have like Godzilla go stomping through and crushing them was like cathartic for your average person. Now, we were talking about Frieza, so let's get back to him. We've already mentioned that he transforms because he's at least partially, maybe, based on Oni, and Oni can transform, or even just general Japanese culture, which emphasizes transformation among its supernatural beings. And it's pretty easy to sort of trace Toriyama's thought processes with these transformations. After his first transformation, he's basically just a bigger version of himself with more pronounced horns and arguably like a more Minotaur-like appearance. In his third form, after his second transformation, we've also got Toriyama no doubt drawing on inspiration from the Alien franchise once again, and definitely harkening back to a design he just happened to like. But by his own admission, these more complicated forms were a pain to draw, hence why Frieza's ultimate form is sleek, and also why he even said like the third form was so much of a pain to draw is why it's only in like 2 chapters. He didn't like drawing it. Now, there's some decent in-universe explanation for this sleekness, though, that we can see through a lot of the characters as they gain higher and higher levels, and that being that it's a more efficient form, allowing the character to channel more energy into a smaller area. I think that's like the in-universe explanation I would go with.
Makes sense.
So that's a lot about Frieza and Japanese history from one episode, but any other thoughts on this character in general? Because I have.
Love this character. He becomes he becomes essentially he's like, for me, he's the perfected form of Vegeta, in the sense that like he's that constant negative force that they keep running up against.
Mm-hmm.
You can't help but like him every time you see him on screen. Like, he just oozes charisma.
Yeah, yes. He's got the Riz, as the kids would say.
Yeah. And I've just, every time I see Frieza on screen, I'm just like, I'm locked in. What is he saying? What's he doing?
Yes, he's compelling, isn't he?
Oh, man, so much. And just in general, I enjoy the character design. I enjoyed the transformations. And his final transformation, to me, I mean, I made the joke, I think it was in our last episode, about it being iPhone Frieza or iMac Frieza. But it's iconic.
Yes.
There's no, I can't think of another villain in all of anime and manga that's at all like Frieza. Truly one of a kind.
No, I have a really hard time thinking of any villain that's been around for as long as Frieza that's as unrepentantly evil as Frieza. And I think maybe the only one that kind of comes close, and I wonder if our buddy Trev, who does not watch Dragon Ball and so is spotty on listening to our episodes, will listen to this one, and maybe I can pull him back into Dragon Ball a little bit. A, Trev, if you're listening, start with the manga, not the anime. B, I would in some ways liken Frieza to like a Mr. Sinister, especially these days. These days, Frieza is a little less interested in being, or at least most recently, or we haven't seen him since he became Black Frieza at the end of the granola arc, or not granola. Yeah, no, it's the granola arc. And so there's potentially a lot more hanging out over him there. But like the most recent Frieza appearances that we've seen, he's more interested in just like messing with things. Like, he brings Broly to Earth just to mess with Goku. He, like, helps Broly attain Super Saiyan by, like, killing his dad and be like, oh no, look what happened. Like,
yeah.
one of your stray energy blasts must have killed your own father. Like, it reminds me of Mr. Sinister just, like, constantly messing with, like, various mutants' DNA and being like, oh, look what happened.
As soon as you said Mr. Sinister, I was just nodding like, yes, that's an excellent comparison. And
so that's like, I think of Frieza as a Mr. Sinister type, especially because I can't, like I said, it's hard to think of too many characters in fiction who stick around that long, who are just unrepentantly nasty, and ultimately, like, especially now, don't seem to have any sort of really like loftier goal other than being like really nasty.
He's
Like,
doing it purely for the love of the game and only for the love of the game.
Yes. And that's where I really gravitate more towards the Chris Ayers interpretation, or the is it it's Nikao though, isn't it? It's Ryusei Nikao. I really gravitate towards those interpretations because it's even in the Japanese, which I don't obviously speak Japanese, you can hear it in his voice.
I know exactly what you're talking. You can tell that he's being condescending, and like everything that he's saying is dripping with sarcasm.
Yes. And at the same time, he is like a petulant child.
Yes.
Because he was made the ruler of the entire galaxy by his daddy.
Yeah.
Like, who just one day was like, here's my son, he now is your boss. And he was like, thanks, Dad.
He's the
All right,
universe's
listen
worst
up.
Nepo baby.
Yeah, yes. We talked about on one of our commentaries, we talked about the last emperor and how I don't remember the name anymore, but like he at the time when he was like 2 years old was named the emperor and never had anything denied him and became like super sadistic throughout his life, and like only his wet nurse and his American tutor were ever able to talk him out of like doing sadistic and nasty things to his servants. Hi, Frieza.
Yeah.
Like,
some pretty heavy parallels there.
Yeah. Yes, that version of Frieza, and I think that's a lot of why I may have said in the past, like, I don't dig Frieza as much as, say, like, Cell. It's because the Frieza that I was most familiar with for a very long time was the Linda Young Frieza. And I'm not saying she does a bad job. I think she actually does a very good job at portraying the character that they are going for. But it is a much more blunt character, a much more kind of obvious, like, it's got way less of that sarcasm.
Yeah.
And that
well, I mean, he's only
snarkiness
part
to it.
Frieza, so it's going to be diluted.
But yeah, it's got way less of that like sarcasm and snark to it. And that's like, just to jump quick, like that's what I really like about Cell, is he's like so narcissistic that it just comes off as more like petty and dripping with like a little bit of sarcasm and snark to it.
Mm-hmm.
But that is like Frieza's like that also, but he is just so much more like, Frieza's the guy, like if you worked with Frieza, he is the guy that you would work with that would like smile to your face and stab you behind your back to your boss like every chance he got to try and get your job.
Sounds about right.
He would smile to your face while stabbing you in the back, like 100%. And
literally stab you in the back at the same time.
You love to hate smarmy little bastards like that.
Yeah, it's the Joffrey Baratheon.
Yes, I was just gonna say.
We love to hate a good villain.
Or Ramsay Bolton.
Yeah.
And that's another, like, Ramsay and Joffrey are two other really good comparisons for like a more modern audience to kind of understand Frieza. As like, he is someone that will do horrible, torturous things to you and then like sit there and, you know, eat his food with a fork and knife and like shoot little taunts at you about them.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Ramsay chopped off what's his face's the guy.
Yes, the sausage.
Yeah. So yes, that's like Frieza will, and then even when he's like later on we see him in Super, he will take a step back to like Beerus and Whis because he knows that they could put him in his place, but at the same time he is you can like see him just like seething with it.
Yeah, it's partially self-preservation, but also partially I am biding my time until there is an opportunity for me to flip the tables here.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, Frieza is absolutely a home run of a character, and there's a reason why they like keep going back to that well. It's because it's a hell of a well. So yeah, I've seen my like attitude toward Frieza change a lot over the years.
Right on.
To where he's I love him so much in the Tournament of Power when he's like, oh, we can't kill people. What if I make them want to kill themselves? Or he's like, oh, I can't kill you, so I'm just going to torture you until you eliminate yourself from the tournament. That's his strategy.
I mean, it is effective.
Yes. So yeah, Frieza is he's a hell of a character and a catalyst for some of Dragon Ball's most iconic moments.
Agreed.
Okay. I'm almost ready. Are you?
No. Ready for what?
I said to channel your ki and gain as much strength as you can.
No, you just said it's going to take some time.
To channel ki and gain strength. I specified that.
But you never said we needed to channel strength.
You mean you've just been sitting there this whole time?
Well, I don't know about sitting. I feel like we're just kind of floating.
Now's not the time to get into semantics with you.
Well, it's better than focusing on how after going on 5 years together, you still haven't learned to communicate clearly.
You know, I'm going to let that slide and stay in the positive mindset we've cultivated because we, not me, not you, we, both of us, need to gather our ki and gain as much strength as possible.
For how long?
At least until the next episode.
Well, but sometimes we record episodes seconds after one ends, and sometimes months. How am I supposed to know which one it's going to be this time?
How is Bekinney supposed to know which one it is this time? Will we be able to gather enough ki to escape this dimensional prison? Find out next time and help us achieve our final forum.
Final Form is written and produced by Tom Gwelly. It is performed by Dan Kinney and Tom Gwelly. Our webmaster is Dan Kinney. Our theme music is provided by YouTube content creator GVG Kid. Want to learn more about the Dragon Ball universe, including concept art, behind-the-scenes interviews, and recommendations from Jelli and Bekinney? Connect with us on social media. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Final Forum Pod. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you receive your podcasts. And of course, make sure to share it with your friends and family and help us spread the word of the glory of Lord Frieza. The Frieza Force thanks you for your listenership.